Hello everyone, welcome back to the Yotsubato series. Today's episode 7 and we want to see what happens between these two after they met. Last time we saw how they met, so Fuka met her sister and her sister told her where to find Yotsuba and she went looking for her. And now after they met, they go together to her father, I presume. じゃあ一緒に行こうね。行こう。Yotsuba-chan何年生？父ちゃんが好き。そっか、父ちゃん好きか。父ちゃんが。So Fuka says, let's go together. 一緒に which means together. 行こう and that is let's go. So whenever you have something with ou at the end, it's usually this form. So 食べよう、行こう、しよう. All of those are the let's do something. Let's go, let's eat, let's do. The ne at the end is seeking for approval. When you put ne at the end of a sentence, you usually want to imply that you want other people to agree with you. And ja means, it's like a introduction to a sentence. So let's go. And Yotsuba answers with iko, so let's go. She's excited. And they walk and talk. Yotsuba-chan nan nensei? Yotsuba-chan is just her name, so just calling out to her. And then nan nensei. Nan nensei is, nan comes from nani, nen is year, and sei is student. So what grade are you in is the question she asks her. For example, an answer to this could be ichinensei, that would be first year, or ninensei, I am a second year. But Yotsuba kind of ignores this question and she just goes like, to-chan ga suki, I like my father. Sokka, to-chan suki ka. The ka here is realization and answering with realization. We had this in the previous episode quite a lot. So this sentence means that you are like, oh, I didn't know that before, but now I do. Kind of nuance. Sokka does the same thing. So Sokka is like, oh, I see. And she again, like Yotsuba again says, to-chan ga, and then she stops and realizes something. Here she leaves away the ga. Usually grammatically correct, you would have to say to-chan ga suki. But because of context, you can leave away a lot of particles in Japanese, and that's basically just what happens here. So when context is clear, when it's not something like unclear, when it's not ambiguous, you can leave away the particles. That is always true. Now she remembers something, and I'm pretty sure this is the father's voice. Like she remembers what her father told her because she talks about him. いいかYotsuba、知らない人について言っちゃダメだぞ。いいものあげるとか、お父さんが呼んでるとか言われても、その人は悪い人かもしれないぞ。いいかYotsuba。いいか is like, are you listening? Or many people would just say, listen Yotsuba. 知らない人, which means people that you don't know. The way this works is you can put just normal verbs in front of nouns to describe the nouns further. This is called a describing verb. So here we have 知らない人, which just describes hito as a person that you don't know. So you can put here anything, any verb that you want to use to describe a person. いない人, for example, is people that aren't here, or a person that isn't here. Just as an example. And he says, 知らない人について. Ni is just like it belongs to ついて because つく is to follow something or someone. And here we have 知らない人について. So following people that you don't know. And then he says 言っちゃダメだぞ. And 言っちゃダメ is a fixed phrase which is used a lot, like not just with iku but with a lot of verbs. So for example with suru you would say しちゃダメ. So this cha comes from してしまう, しちゃう or 言っちゃう. This is the casual way of saying してしまう or 言ってしまう or all of these forms, which means to end up doing, right? To end up going would be 言ってしまう. And 言っちゃう means the same thing but casual, and then you can put dame at the end and take away the u, right? So it's icha dame, which means it's forbidden, because dame means forbidden or bad. So it's bad to end up going is icha dame. This is used a lot. You will basically encounter this everywhere when you talk with kids. So people talk like that with kids when they want to tell them this is forbidden, you are not allowed to do this. Icha dame, shicha dame, tabecha dame, all of these. It's always the same. And this here is basically the te form without the te. That's how you form this cha, right? This cha form. You just take away the te and add cha or chao. It's forbidden to follow or to go with and follow a person you don't know. And then we have dazo. And da is this, right? Which you put after nouns or adjectives at the end of sentences. And then zo. And zo is an end of sentence particle. I will plug my video once again up here because I explain end of sentence particles quite well in that video. And zo is also one of them. And zo is like yo. So it's an explaining end of sentence particle. This indicates that this sentence is explaining something important to a person, but it is manly and rough. So that's basically how this works. It's exactly the same particles with very slight nuance changes, but women don't use this too often, but men use this all the time. And that's also why this is zo here, because this also indicates that this is the father talking. Obviously from context you can think of that, but this zo just enforces this idea because it's a man talking. Imono ageru toka. Imono is something good. Mono means an object or something, and i is good. Ageru, here the o is left away, by the way, because it's obviously not really needed. O is probably the most omitted particle in the Japanese language because, well, using something is obvious. It's very obvious most of the time. And toka here is when you make an example. So whenever you want to make an example about anything, you can put toka at the end. So yeah, that's basically how this is used. For example is what toka means. When you make an enumeration, you use toka as well. So kore toka, are toka, this for example, or that for example, right? And this is what he's doing here. This, for example, or this, for example, as you can see the toka here, right? So that's how this is used. It's similar to shi, if you know how that works, but I'm not going to go into that. So otosan ga, which is the next example, as you will see from the toka. Otosan ga, so your father is, the subject of the sentence here is otosan, so your father. Yonderu, which is the present continuous form of to call or to call someone. So he's calling for you is yonderu, which would usually be yondeiru, but many Japanese people just don't say the I, which is usually there. So yondeiru just becomes yonderu. Tabeteiru becomes tabeteru. So, for example, they give you something good, or they give you something good, or they tell you. So they tell you is here. Iwarete mo. So iwareru is the passive form of of telling. So if you are told, for example, that your father is calling you, or that they want to give you something good, so you in passive form is iwareru. That's just a conjugation you need to learn. So learn your conjugations well, because they're really important, of understanding context. Really, really important. But here's just, if you are told. And the mo here means even. So even if you are told. Iwarete mo is a fixed kind of conjugation which always says even if. So taberarete mo would mean even if you are eaten, or tabete mo would mean even if you eat. Oh, and one more thing is that this is in te form. That's also always this way. Used quite often actually. Iwarete mo. Ko natte mo. So even if it becomes that way. Ko natte mo. So natte mo. And then the continuation of the sentence comes here. Sono hito wa. So that person is warui hito. A bad person. Warui means bad. It's the adjective. I adjective. And kamo shirenai means maybe or might be. So that person might be a bad person is what this means. And the zo here is the same zo as before up here. It's yo. So it's a teaching particle. You are telling new information to the person that is listening in a manly way, because you could just exchange this with yo and it would mean the same thing. So kamoshirenai yo and kamoshirenai zo mean the same. Then she realizes that what she's doing is basically what she's not supposed to, right? So she's like, oh no. She lets go of her hand and she's like, chotto oyoji o omoidashita. Chotto oyoji o omoidashita. Ha? Achi ni bye bye. Eh? And Yotsuba runs. Doshita no? So she lets go of her hand and then she goes like, chotto yoji o omoidashita. Chotto is a little. Usually this is used when you excuse yourself or when you want to imply like short time, like wait a little bit, for example, would be chotto, like, right? Chotto matte. Chotto yoji o omoidashita. Omoidashita is to remember. Omoidasu comes from omou, which means to think, and dasu, which means to bring out. So you think and you bring that thought out. That is basically remembering. It's actually quite a nice word, I think. And it's the past form of omoidasu. Omoidashita. And yoji is something that you need to do. It can also be described as a task or an errand, something like that. So, chotto yoji o omoidashita. I remembered a task I have to do. And she's like, huh? What? Achi ni. And here she implies that she goes over there. So achi is the same as asoko. But asoko doesn't have a direction. Achi has a direction. This is the difference between, for example, also sochi and soko, or kochi and koko, right? Koko is the place you're talking about, and kochi is the direction from wherever you're talking about to this place, right? So kochi kite would be come to this place, and that is always used when you talk about someone that is not in this place currently. This would be a imperative. So kochi kite, sochi ite, go over there, or achi ite, right? So she's saying achi ni, which implies that she here would also say iku. So I'm going there. Achi ni. Or I have to do something over there. Like this task is over there. Would also be like this could also mean that. So achi ni aru, for example. And then she says bye bye and runs off. And of course, Fuka is kind of like, what's happening? And she runs after her and asks her, doshita no? And doshita is a fixed phrase that means what's up, or what's bad, what's happening. Usually, what's up. That's the easiest way to translate this. So what's up? And the no is the asking particle in casual form. Zenryoku shiso? This means to run as fast as you can, basically. So zenryoku is with one's full power. Ryoku is power, and zen is from zenbu, so full force. And shiso is running, so running as fast as one can. And she's surprised about it. This is always surprise in Japanese. I don't know if if I ever mentioned this before. Might have not, because it's quite obvious, but just to mention it. And she goes, Machinasai! Tasukete! Tasukete! Yotsuba screams out of her lungs. So what this means here is she runs full force and she's surprised about it, Fuka. And she says, Machinasai. Machinasai is an imperative from a motherly perspective. Again, something really nuance-based. But you could also like say mate, which would be the same thing, right? But machinasai has a tone of parental advice. So you talk from above, from a parental position, somebody who is more knowledgeable than you usually, and you say this with authority. This is the most important thing here. This is an authority imperative. Machinasai or any nasai word is most often used by women. It can be used by men as well. It's not like exclusive or anything, but it is very feminine in a way. I don't know really why, but just from experience, if you read any manga, watch any anime, machinasai or nasai forms are often used by women. And you can do this with any verb. And the way you form this is you use the dictionary, no, not the dictionary, but the mas form, and you take away the mas and just add nasai. So it's actually easier to use than the te form in a sense, but the nuance behind it is not like a very common thing you could use. So for example, if you want to say go, like go, I'm telling you to go, I'm your authority, I have the say in what you do, then you can say ikinasai, which comes from ikimasu, right? You just take the iki and add nasai. Ikinasai or tabenasai. Shinasai. From shimasu, suru, shimasu, shinasai. That's how you form this, and it's very, very common. So she's like, machinasai! Wait! And of course, Yotsuba is kind of panicking, and she goes like, tasukete! Which means, save me. You've definitely heard this. It's a very common thing. Save me! Comes from tasukeru, and this is the imperative form, the te form. Tasukete. And Fuka is kind of like confused. She's like, hey? Eh? And Yotsuba just screams as loudly as she can, tasukete! So of course, people like this woman is like, oh yeah? What? This is usually not, I don't know, I've never really seen this in real life, but I guess this would be like when something drags your attention. Then you say like, oh yeah? Like you notice something. I don't really know. This is often used by old people. I've never really seen this used in real life, so. Doushita no, Fuka-chan? Iie, nandemo arimasen kara. And then we have her uncle, and she almost gets run over. So, oh yeah? She notices something, and she goes like, Doushita no? What's up? We had this before. What's up? Fuka-chan, her name. So, what's up, Fuka-chan? And she's like, Iie, no. Nandemo. Nandemo is like nanimo, but when you talk about a situation. So, nandemo nai, you've definitely heard that. Nandemo nai is the same as nandemo, but nandemo is just the shortened version. But usually the long version would be nandemo nai. Nai is just aru in the negative form. So nandemo nai, there is nothing here, there's nothing happening. And then she goes, nandemo arimasen kara. And as I said, nandemo nai, if you want to say it politely, you take the nai and you turn it polite. And nai is aru, as you know, in the past, negative form, right? So, nandemo nai, and you take the nai, and aru in negative polite form is arimasen. So, nandemo arimasen is the polite way to say this. And kara is just, it usually means because, but here it's more of a sentence end particle in a way of saying that this is an explanation. Kara implies that there is more to it, in a sense of like, if you would take these sentences and expand them a little bit more, it would be like, why shouldn't you help? Is the implied explanation here for this question. Why shouldn't you help? Because there's nothing happening. So that's why here's kara. In English, you don't really do this, but in Japanese, it's very common. So she doesn't ask like, should I help you? Or why should I help, right? She doesn't ask that. She explains this with this sentence, like in one sentence. Usually in English, you would have to say, you don't have to help because there's nothing, like there's nothing happening. But in Japanese, you can just say, because there's nothing happening, and it implies that she doesn't have to help. Because this obviously implies like, should I help you? What's happening? Is there something I need to do? And yeah. And then Mr. Uncle comes by and almost runs her over. Whoa! Yotsuba? Sumimasen. Nanda? So he's surprised that it's Yotsuba, and she goes by and says, I'm sorry. Sumimasen. The polite way of saying sorry. And he's like, Nanda. And Nanda, I don't want to go too deep into it because there is one other use of it, but it's just like a confused, what? What's happening? Kind of confusion. In situations like these where you are having another expectation and then the expectations turns out to be wrong. Like you are disappointed or you're glad about something, then you say nanda. So that's usually when you're using this. Exactly this way. So nanda. So what? I was worrying for nothing. That's usually how I would use this. So I don't know why this is here, but I think this just means that he's confused about it. And here we have tomari nasai, which is the same, like you almost can't read it, but it's the same nasai form up here, right? So machi nasai. Here it's tomaru, which means to stop, and the nasai form. So again, wait,